right? This was a palace. It's called Sardar Mahal. So, as I said, Mahal would mean that it was built for a lady. And Sardar, it's local welcome. That's local welcome. So once you go inside and you take a look, you will realize that this is a very, very rich place. Unfortunately, it's completely trashed because it is being used by the GFNC office. And the fact that has everybody seen pictures of like the Malwala Palace?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a pity that they bought the property, Muscatine business, and after buying a heritage property, they decided to demolish it and then build this ugly structure. Right? If only they understood the value of retaining a heritage building, it probably could have been, a multi. I know it could have made them a lot of money if they only knew how to use heritage, right? I mean, it could have been a fancy heritage destination. But I think that perspective was missing, that foresight. It's because nothing like that happened in Hyderabad that they couldn't envision something like that. If you go to Rajasthan or most other parts,
Cafes and
yeah, they know how to use it. Unfortunately, in Hyderabad, that has not been the way. So this year, with a few architects and a few investment bankers, we're trying to come together and see if we could create that sort of a platform where we can enlist heritage property owners, try to get investors, and try to see how we can repurpose these buildings and convert them into heritage cafes and hotels and stuff. It's a big project, but there are a few big players who are coming in. So hopefully it will start happening. But it's a terrible, terrible loss that Malwala Palace had to go. And this we have today, but this is also in a very pathetic condition. And I wouldn't be surprised someday if they just decided to just demolish it and build a modern structure in its place. Now the excuse inevitably each time is that these are old structures. And since they are old, they have no value, right? And of course, I mean, there's money to be made whenever you demolish something and build something new. There are a few people who make money. And government buildings especially fall prey to this kind of a scam, this kind of corruption. So, unfortunately. Alright, so we will go inside and then we will have a small gathering just like we did at Sardar. But what I would like to tell you here is that this is a very unique building in terms of its story. Right? A lot of people who come to Charminar have no idea that this exists, number one, because it's a government office. And most people think it's a government office, so they don't go inside, not realizing that this is a heritage property. And even if you go inside, you would not realize that this has a fascinating story behind this building and why it exists. So it's called Sardar Mahal, right? It evidently was built for somebody called Sardar Begum, right? So who was Sardar Begum? Who built it for her? And why was it built, right? If you ask these three questions, it was built by the 6th Nizam, Mehboob Ali Khan. It was built by the king himself, the Nizam, right? And it was built for this lady called Sardar Begum. So Sardar Begum, who was Sardar Begum? Was she a queen? No. Was she a royal lady? No. Right? Yeah. Sardar Begum was actually a tawaif. And the most closest translation to the word tawaif in English would be a concubine. I hope you know what a concubine is, right? The concubine would not really do justice to what a tawaif is, because these were very highly learned, very highly skilled and very highly trained women. They were trained in not just dance, music and singing, but they were also very adept in writing poetry, in storytelling, they had to engage the royal people in conversations. So they were trained in philosophy and politics. In fact, if you go further back into history, there were these tawaifs who used to advise the kings on war strategies. There was in fact a tawaif in Hyderabad whose name is Mahalaka Baisanda, whose grave is close to Osmania University. And she was a war strategist. She would go with the king on a battlefield and give advice as to how the king should plan his battles. So to call them concubines would be doing injustice to who they actually were. So Sardar Begum was a tawaif, and tawaif is a word that many of us do not understand, but if you have some introduction to Japanese culture, they have something similar called Gisha. Right? So this is how I explain this to foreigners, that Tawaifs are the Gishas of the local culture, of the Indian vernacular culture. So this was built for a Begum called Sardar Begum, and she was a Tawaif. But that's not the story. The story is Sardar Begum, despite having this beautiful grand palace built for her, never really stayed here. And that is the story. Right? We'll go inside and I'll share the story. It's kind of hot here. Yeah, I'll give you a couple of minutes just to take pictures, because as soon as people come in, unless you take pictures, there's no monkey tasalli. So take a couple of minutes to take pictures right from here. We'll be going inside, don't step away. From this vantage point, take how many ever pictures you want, and then we gather here to share the story of this building. He has an exam. So she'll be going for an exam and then coming back and joining us in the evening. And I remembered her because I was going to talk about what style does it remind you of? British. Right, very colonial, very European, very colonial. Very Victorian. Yeah. Right, yeah. European, French, Greek influences. So, wish we had the architect to tell us the precise architectural style. Anyway, the sixth Nizam, Mahbub Ali Khan, was very English in his taste. Right, he had a very anglicized upbringing, which is why if you go to Falaknuma Palace as well, which was built by Vikarul Umrah, but it was furnished by the sixth Nizam to some extent. And both Vikarul Umrah, who was basically his brother-in-law, and the sixth Nizam, Mahbub Ali Khan, both of them had very anglicized lifestyles. They were playing polo, everything that a British would do. These were doing the same thing. So, influenced by very English colonial, and they traveled a lot to the continent, right? And every time they would come back, they would try and replicate or recreate what they saw in the continent, either in France or in the US. So, which is why the buildings which were built by the sixth Nizam have a very strong European influence in them, right? And that's the story of this building. That when this building was gifted to this Tawaif, what happened is the story, right? So, the kings, the Nizams, they had this habit of gifting things in style, right? If they were happy, if anybody made them happy, they immediately had to gift them something. So sometimes it would just be a watch. The sixth Nizam especially was so giving that if somebody made him happy, he would just remove whatever he had, some diamond ring, a watch, and just gift it. Say, it's my gift. When he was especially pleased with a Tawaif, when he had a favorite Tawaif that he was completely besotted with, right? Obviously, he would gift her something very, very special, right? And the best thing probably that he could think of to gift a Tawaif that he absolutely was besotted with, he thought could be a grand palace for her, right? And right across the street was a Tawaif Khana. Tawaif Khana would be a place where a whole lot of these Tawaifs would be there. And contrary to what we believe today, it was not, how do I put it? It was not a taboo. In fact, noble families would send their kids to these Tawaif Khana so that they would learn the tehzeeb and they would learn the tamiz, right? The way of speaking and the way of conducting themselves, because these women were the epitome of culture. They were so cultured that their language, their diction, their poetry, and they were very learned in the arts, in poetry, in literature, and they were very, very knowledgeable. So young people would come there to learn from them, right? Especially the vernacular way of living, the way of life, tehzeeb and tamiz of Deccan. So when the sixth Nizam was absolutely in fascination about her. So he decided to gift her a palace, right? But if you were a king and you wanted to surprise the person, what you would probably do is first build it and then give it as a surprise gift, right? But when you do that with a building, it's much more complicated because first it takes a lot of time to build it, a lot of effort to build it. And that's what Mehboob Ali Khan thought. He thought he would build a grand building and then he would take her into this building. He would say, let me take you somewhere. And he would bring her into this building, show her, and then ask her, how do you like this? Right? And then she's going to say, absolutely fabulous. And he thought he was going to say, my dear, this is for you. So that was in his head, that was what he was envisioning, that he would invite her and gift it to her in style, with panache. But unfortunately, there's a lot of slip between the cup and the lip. So I mean, man proposes, God disposes, sort of a thing. So he was hoping that this would happen. This is what he was seeing in his head. But when he actually brought her in, showed her the place, and asked her, what do you think of this? She said, I'm not impressed. She said, I don't like it too much because it's too foreign. And you have to understand that these women are brought up in very traditional, ways of upbringing where, traditional architecture, traditional culture is something that is deeply ingrained in them. So to come to a place where something was very foreign, she said, it's good, but, not to my taste. And Mehboob Ali Khan just didn't know how to react because he didn't see it like this in his head. He's like, suddenly, ye kya ho gaya? I wasn't expecting this response. So then he somehow said, well, you know what, actually, I built this for you, but oops, I just had an oops moment.
Should have asked you earlier.
But then he said, I built it for you, so if you may choose to, you can live here, it's for you. And then she said, why would I even live here? Right? I'm very happy. She said, I'm very happy living where I am. And this is, I wouldn't be comfortable living in a place where I don't connect with the architecture of the place. And hence, a palace which was built for a wife never became the home of the wife. It was still called Sardar Mahal though, because it was built for Sardar Begum. But Sardar Begum actually never lived here. And I find the story fascinating because it's only in Deccan, it's only in India, in places like this, probably that something like this would happen, right? In a way, if you look at it, you had a concubine or a wife refusing the king a grand gift that he made, right? And this is impossible for anybody else to do. It was only because she was a wife. It was only because it was Sardar Begum, also a very outspoken and a very, confident. There are stories about how outspoken she was. Only she could do it. You could not imagine anybody else in the kingdom, a subject of the king, where the king would gift and he would say, thank you, but no thank you, right? That would be extremely, extremely inappropriate. But she was a tawaif and that was fine. So that's the story of this building. And in our culture, we believe that if things start a certain way, that would be the destiny of the place and things would continue to happen that way. We call it boni, right? If you go to any business in the morning, they try to squeeze a few extra rupees from you saying, you're the first customer, so please give me a little more, right? And also, if you're the first customer, they don't let you go because they believe that if the first customer leaves them, then they'll have a bad day. So likewise, this building started off with a refusal. And throughout its history, it has had a history of different people refusing it. At some point, it was the health department was housed here, and they said not working out, they moved out. And then I think some other office. So there are 3 or 4 times that this building housed various departments, various projects, and each time they said, we have to move. So about 15 years ago, finally it became the office of the GHMC, and they haven't refused it yet. But the government, I believe, for the last 10 years or 15 years has been trying to convert this into a museum. I don't see that happening in the near future, even though proposals have been made. It's a huge potential. It's a building with a huge potential. It could be converted into a cafe. It's close to Charminar, wide spaces, lots of rooms, nice courtyards, and if it is redone, it could be really fantastic, opulent, grand and all of that. Now, architecturally, when we come in, most buildings, okay, so I'll share that. The actual palace is inside. So you have what is called a curtain wall, because this is the palace of a woman, and women were not exposed to the male gaze or the public zenana. So you have a zenana. So you have a wall, and beyond the wall is the actual palace of the Begum. So we'll go there. Also, when we gather there, we'll see when the zenana palace is constructed, how is it different from other palaces architecturally. Now you come straight, you see a wall, right? And there are two buildings on either side. There's a left wing and a right wing, and then there's a wall, right? So that is because this is called a curtain wall, and it would have pardas, but this actually had two entrances and pardas on the entrances which were covered. So only women were allowed, and of course if the king was walking in, he could go in, of course. So each of the zenana courtyard would have a fountain and a whole palace inside that courtyard or around that courtyard. So this wing, you see that fountain there? I think this wall, this zenana wall to the right had been demolished because they needed access into those rooms. But on the left, it's more or less the way that it was initially created. So we'll walk there.
City, you can go to Secunderabad, you can go to Koti, you can go to anywhere, and you can have very similar experiences to this, and just go on a voyage of discovery by walking through one door and then discovering that there's more and more and more and more, and more stories to be found, which, you know, is one of the things that is really wonderful about this city. You know, I've seen many of you like photography as well, so there's a lot of amazing opportunities that are just hidden from the normal passerby. You have to walk, you have to be exploring, a little bit curious. The last cohort of people, one of them was a lady who I think got married this month. But she always said to me, why are you doing this? Because I'm curious. And I think if you're curious, that's a very important quality if you want to really embrace the heritage. Always why, what might be behind that door, what might be down that alley, what might be here. Sometimes, of course, you go and look and you see nothing. But more often than not in this city, you will find something, which is good. I mean, there are other cities, of course, in India and in the world where that's also true, but I think this is one of the richest in that respect of any that I've been. Anyway, carry on.